presentable. Ah. Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Subconscious Sessions. And welcome back to those of you who have already listened to my first episode. And for those of you who have not listened to my first episode, I would highly recommend doing so. Reason for that is because the first episode does actually cover kind of all around what the podcast kind of encompasses, what its goal is, who I am, and why I am doing this. However, the first episode is only available on audio, but it is available on all sorts of platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Podbean app, Spotify, Amazon/Audible, iHeartRadio, Player FM, Listen Notes, Podchaser, and Boomplay. So if you do have any of those, feel free to go back and listen to the first episode so you may catch up and kind of understand more about this podcast and what it's all about. However, if you really don't have the time, or if you really don't want to because there is no video, it's not too late to start in this episode. There might be information I refer back to, but it should be light enough that you could start off this journey here within this episode. See, this podcast is designed to run in parallel with my own dreaming journey. So, in this episode, we will be covering how I started dreaming, how I started lucid dreaming, more about the abilities that I have in my own dreams. And the reason I want to get into that specifically is because I want other people who might be interested in lucid dreaming to kind of get a taste, get an idea of what it's like to actually be able to control a whole world of your own. Kind of get an idea of what you're able to do in this world of yours that you create inside your mind. We'll finally get into what the subconscious is and why it's so important and how dreams fit into that as well. Then we'll talk about why dreams are so fundamentally vital. And then we'll kind of bridge off into dream interpretation and why dream interpretation is such an important thing that we do not utilize enough, and touch upon the importance of it. Right. So where did my journey start? Well, I tend to tell people, and I think it's very easy to tell people, that I have always had a kind of natural tendency towards dreaming and lucid dreaming. And the reason I say that is because I still have memories, a very clear memory of my first dream that I had when I was only 6 years old. I used to remember dreaming intermittently throughout my childhood, but very rarely, It was only when I was about 12 that I think it started showcasing just kind of how it was a bit more natural for me. And the reason I say that is because when I was 12, I had outgrown nightmares, because when something scary would happen in a dream, it wasn't frightening for me at all. It was almost as if I knew somewhere in the back of my head that I was dreaming, even if I wasn't aware of it in the dream, even if I didn't even know about lucid dreaming at the time, or the ability to kind of control your dreams. I still kind of just always knew that I was never in any danger, none of it was real. But my actual journey started when I was 14. And it's a bit of a funny story. It started when I had the flu for about a week or two. And typical May fashion, I decided I was bored because I wasn't able to do anything. So I figured I'd entertain myself by finding a way to try and remember my dreams more often. And the method I came up with was very simple, very straightforward. And that was that every time I went to bed and I closed my eyes and I was about to go to sleep, I would repeat to myself in my mind, I would say, I will remember my dream in the morning. I will remember my dream in the morning. And I would do this for maybe like 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. It really depended on how tired I was. And surprisingly, it worked really well. I think it was only within 2 or 3 weeks that I started remembering my dreams regularly. So at that stage, I was remembering my dreams probably around 5 times a week, if not every day. And once that started happening, it only took a few months, maybe like 2, 3 months, for me to start lucid dreaming. And I think from my own experience that this was probably because I was spending so much time thinking about my dreams when I was awake, and I was so engaged in my dreams when I was asleep. I think my brain just naturally was able to kind of pull that distinction, be like, okay, now you're awake, now you're asleep. And then the lucidity just kind of followed after that. And I think that's probably the most natural way to come into lucid dreaming. I know there's a lot of tips and tricks out there on how to get into it, but I feel like that is the most natural way once you're open to it and once you're kind of aware of it, that you'll very easily fall into it as long as you can remember your dreams more. So that kind of brings us to, well, what was it like when I started lucid dreaming? Well, I think a lot of people have this idea in their head that you just kind of wake up, quotation mark, wake up in your dream and you're like, aha, I can now control the world. And that was most certainly not the case for me. For me, lucid dreaming has always been a skill that I had to practice, and I had to work very hard at honing it and perfecting it, which, let's be real, again, as I said in my previous episode, wasn't a very big deal because you sleep anyways. You're literally spending half your life asleep. So what else are you going to be doing except putting it to good use? So for me, as soon as I started realizing I could dream and I could lucid dream, first thing I started doing was flying, obviously. And at the start, it was very funny because my level of flying was very what I call beginner level flying. And that's when you start like frantically flapping your arms like a desperate delusional penguin, hoping to just take off. After a while, I learned to kind of just float. So if I was walking next to someone, I would just kind of cross my legs like Buddha style. And I would just kind of float and hover above the ground next to the person. Then flying became a thing where I would be able to move through the air freely, which was challenging because when I first started that, my body would feel very heavy. I would never be able to take off very far. Then, only within the last 2 years, I'm almost ashamed to say, I learned the other way of flying, which I dubbed the Superman flight. As you can guess, it's because I watched the Superman movie and I saw him just fly up into the sky and then he just shot off. Just supersonic, boom. And I was like, yep, that looks pretty fast. That seems very practical. It took me only a little bit, but I did get it. And I only use that form of flying now if I'm like in a hurry. Other than that, I like to just take my time. Next was walking on water. This one was also difficult. And I always describe it as if you imagine you take very thin level of cling film. I can't quite remember saran wrap, I think it was called in some other countries. You know, the plastic you use to kind of wrap your food, keep it fresh. And if you take a thin layer of that and you put it over water, but very loosely, and then you try walking it. For me, if I put too much pressure on, I will go straight through the water. If I didn't put enough pressure on, I would lose balance and I would fall over. Now, naturally, now I can walk on water. I can make water into a trampoline so I can bounce on it. I can even climb out of water using the surface level of the water as a hard surface. So I can be swimming and then I can just reach up and just pull myself out. I can also turn it into ground if I really feel like it. Then came walking through walls. I really liked this one. At the start, it was very difficult. I would push my hands up against the wall and I would just hope for the best. And I would just be pushing. I'd be like, ugh. And this one was very interesting because when I actually started going through the wall with my fingers, my hands, my arms, I would feel the wall around my body, like just kind of hugging around my body as I was going through it, as if it was only my body going through it, but the rest of the wall remained. Eventually, I obviously learned to walk through the wall as if it was just air. I've had a lot of other things I do in dreams, but ones I use frequently enough is telekinesis. So, being able to move stuff with your mind, within your mind. One of my favorites actually is being able to rewind. Now, I don't use it often, but to be able to rewind time. I don't mean going back in time, because you can't really go back in time in your dream because it's not real. Although I have gone back to dinosaurs in my dream, but to rewind time when I make a mistake or I don't like how something went, or if I just want to change something, I can just rewind the dream. I can just rewind it and I can just start up to a certain stage, whatever stage I want, and I can just redo it. I got that inspiration actually from playing a racing game, because in a lot of racing games, when you crash, you can rewind for a few seconds back onto the road. Other things I can do is obviously stuff like creating fire, controlling water, air, earth. Although I've always found controlling fire was always a bit temperamental with me, and I'm not quite sure why, but I could look into it and find out for you. Oh, and I bet a lot of people will love this, because I bet a lot of people will benefit from this. Shape-shifting. You've ever wanted to change your hair? You ever wanted to know what you look like with different hair? With piercings, with tattoos, with body modifications? You ever wanted to know what you look like as the opposite gender? Or another species? Because I can absolutely change to another species. Usually, when I was younger, I would choose stuff like werewolves and dragons, because why not? Although I have been real life animals, but it's never as exciting. Never really become a bird, because you can fly anyways. I can obviously summon things and summon people, so I can dream about anyone or anywhere. I can go anywhere in my dream, which is why I've said this in my previous podcast episode, that I have places I like to go. And I actually only really recently, I had this dream where I was in this nightclub, this kind of bar that doesn't actually exist, but it exists in the city that I live. In my dream, it's in this city, and it's always in the same place. And I went to it the other night in my dream, and I thought to myself, oh, I've been here a few times before, actually. And I was like, oh, this must be like a new hangout place. I was like, cool. Because I have different houses around the place. I have my water park, which is my local park that I've turned into a water park. But now I have a nightclub, so that's kind of cool. I can turn my dream into black and white. I can turn it into cartoon. I can control the weather. There really, really, really is no limit. I can even go into space. Heck, I've even eaten a planet. Yeah, you heard that right. And you know what? I'm traumatized because it was so disgustingly sweet. Never again. Never again. Now, obviously in my dreams, I am invincible, but that's not to say that I always win. And there is a reason for that I will get into later on. I don't feel pain. There was for many years that I did when it came to sharp objects, because I had a dream when I was younger, before I started properly lucid dreaming, where a sword actually hurt me. And then I think it was a psychological thing where I always assumed sharp things would inflict pain. And it was only through a dream where I had to stab myself through the heart with a knife to sacrifice myself for my friends, that I just gritted through it and did it, and no more pain. No more pain. So yeah, you get the idea of kind of now the possibilities within dreams and what you'll be able to do within a dream. So let's move on. Now, in order to get into topics like dream interpretation, it's very important to touch upon the subconscious. And yes, this is the part that this whole podcast is actually inspired of. Not this exact part. This is only a part of it, because your subconscious is so large that it's going to take multiple episodes dedicated to it alone to cover it, which is, again, why I'm doing this podcast. That and a few other reasons I'll get into later on. Those are the wild reasons. That the best parts come towards the end of the podcast. This podcast is designed to mimic my own journey, where things just got better and better and wilder. So yeah, let's get into it. So the subconscious, for those who are not familiar, is this part of your brain that is outside of your kind of direct conscious control. And it's the part of your brain that ranges from anything like automatic functions like breathing, storing memories, breaking and forming habits, to other more complicated, intricate stuff like dealing with emotions and even acting as a kind of autopilot with very kind of routine stuff. And it was actually psychologist Sigmund Freud, amongst some other peers, other psychologists, who I will get into in other future episodes. I will get into the itty bitty nitty gritty details of these psychologists more. But for now, I just kind of want to focus a bit on Sigmund Freud for this specific section, and not in a whole lot of detail. But so Sigmund Freud kind of came up with this theory of the unconscious. He was a neurologist and a psychologist, and he spent a lot of his time dedicated to psychoanalyzing patients. He carried out this form of therapy that is very much like what we imagine therapy to be when we think of it. When you think of lying down on a couch, just talking, spilling out your guts while your therapist sits there and just writes notes. Freud liked this method because he believed by kind of letting people just talk, they would unknowingly and subconsciously just let things slip. That would give a kind of insight into the deeper aspects of their problems. And a great example of this is actually a case study who she was dubbed Anna O, but her real name was Bertha Pappenheim. I know, great name. And Bertha was referred to Freud because the doctors couldn't figure out why she refused to drink liquids. And she was, for a few weeks, she had only been surviving by eating fruit. And in a session with Freud, she was just talking and she let it slip that she had an incident recently where she had seen a dog belonging to her governess take a drink out of a glass of water. And the thought of her governess sharing a glass of water with her dog disgusted her so much that it just turned her off liquids altogether. But she wasn't aware of this. It was stored so deeply into her subconscious as something so grotesque that it was something she should avoid. And it was only when she had a hypnotherapy session with a guy called Joseph Breuer, don't know if I pronounced that right, and it was there when she was able to kind of verbalize it properly and talk through it that she was cured. And this demonstrated tremendously the powers of our subconscious that was kind of hidden underneath. He believed that the unconscious was this part that dealt with repressed emotions, hidden fears, stuff like that. Now I am simplifying it, and I'm bringing this up because I think it's such a valuable example to kind of what we'll talk about next, which is my own take on the subconscious, which is for this part, it is very digestible and understandable, but later on it will get highly controversial. So brace yourself. The subconscious used to originally be viewed as quite limited, as kind of just dealing with these basic functions and just kind of, again, processing emotions. But as time went on, we started realizing that wasn't everything. Even 10 years ago, when I was in college studying applied psychology, we went through a lot of studies where it showed the powers of the subconscious, how it could even do stuff like control and guide your body when it came to people with certain brain injuries and certain neurological issues. And I will get into a lot of these studies and stuff in future episodes. But a great example of this is body language. Because unless you're aware of body language and unless you study it, when you're talking to people, you're not thinking about which direction your feet are pointing and whether you're crossing your legs or if you're crossing your arms or if you're tilting your head or if you're scratching your cheek or you're fiddling with your ear, you know? And while our subconscious has all these kind of hidden functions that we're now discovering, from my own experience in studying it for 13 years now, is that it is so underexplored. There is so much more to the subconscious that we are just not talking about. It has the ability to carry out so much. And I really hope that this podcast will bring that to light. How do I see the subconscious overall? Well, you have to think of it like this. In the same way that our conscious part of our brain developed through evolution for over a million years to go from primates to what we call now our human species, to kind of the same level of intellect that we have now, your subconscious has always been a part of your brain, and it has also evolved in the background alongside our consciousness. In the same way that our brains evolved to survive, your subconscious also evolved to help you survive, but in a different sense. So our own consciousness evolved directly to deal with ourselves, others, and life in response to our environment. It underwent a lot of physical changes in response. It's why humans developed things over time like self-defense mechanisms, things that are outside of our conscious control, that your subconscious thinks is the best way to deal with certain things. Because we were so busy focusing on survival that we just couldn't multitask. So subconscious then became this space where we could kind of store all these intense emotions. Like, think of like if someone has a fear of dogs because they were bit as a child, they have no memory of it. Or maybe someone falls in love with someone, even though consciously they thought that they never liked the person. Or how sometimes you can innately distrust someone, even though they've never given you a reason not to trust them. But then you find out they're an awful human being. And most primal emotions can be found within our subconscious. And that's why dreams play such a vital role, because they're this space where all these things can be dealt with while you are not consciously active. Like, you have to remember that scientific evidence, now, when I say scientific evidence in any of these stages, I mean to come back to them in other episodes to actually go through the studies, the research, to present to you all these things for those of you who are interested. But for now, let's keep it simple. So animals dream. They do. And things like threat simulation theory, which we touched upon in my previous episode, kind of can help explain why animals benefited evolutionary from dreaming, and why dreaming has always been such an integral, fundamental part of our life, even since before we developed the kind of consciousness that we have now. So it's no surprise that that part of your brain would also keep evolving with the rest of your brain. And as it did, you know, when a lot of things evolve in life, life can find other purposes for it. But dreaming essentially became multi-purpose, because you have to remember that before we could speak using language and words the way we do now, we thought within our minds in stuff like concept, ideas, imagination, emotion, memory, you know? And your subconscious, while it has evolved, it still retains this primal aspect of this ancient communication method from before, when we could speak. And that's why your dreams will seem really, really random and crazy. But it's all symbolic. It's all symbolism because it comes from a time where we didn't have words to communicate. And while your subconscious can actually use words and language to communicate, it's not the most efficient. It's not the most familiar. It's not the easiest for it to do. And that's why different cultures will have different dream interpretations of the same thing. Because in different cultures, different things carry different significance and different meaning. Because again, different cultures communicate differently. But despite that, humanity still has similarities across all cultures because we are a human species. And as such, dreams also have similarities across all cultures. Dream interpretation dates back as far as 3000 BC. And even throughout history, we've always remained humans. We still have stuff in common with people from thousands of years ago. So those will also still be present in our dreams from literally thousands of years of doing this dreaming. It was only in the 1800s that dream interpretation became a psychological science where it was started being based upon research that thousands and thousands of people and their lives and their dreams and their emotions and their minds have all been analysed and cross-referenced, that people psychologists will actually be able to build databases of what certain things meant, what they represented. And it's why, if you interpret dreams, if you actually take the time to interpret them, all these seemingly unrelated and random things in your dreams will have an underlying theme. They will carry the same kind of similar messages. That's why even before I started this whole journey of exploring the subconscious, 3 years before that, I was big into dream interpretation because I could see it for myself. When I was going through certain things or feeling certain emotions in real life, I would see these repetitive things come up and time again within my dreams. A great example of that is if I was avoiding something in real life, whether it was a situation or my own emotions or dealing with something, I would have dreams about running away or of being chased by something, of something coming after me or someone was trying to get me. And that's a universal thing. It's probably one of the more straightforward direct translations from life into dreams. Dream interpretation became a way of understanding emotions I couldn't quite grasp. Emotions that didn't quite make sense to me, or even emotions that seemed too intense that I was like, I don't know how to cope with this. My dreams would help me. Dream interpretation then became my way of understanding emotions I couldn't grasp. If I was frustrated at something, or if I was sad about something and I couldn't understand why, I would have a dream about it, and then the next day I would be able to just interpret it, and I would know why, and I would be able to work through it. Dreams became like a crutch. And sometimes I wouldn't even have to try. Sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes I would just go to sleep and these subconscious feelings I had, my subconscious would work through it itself. And I would wake up and I would be better. I would just feel better and I would be better. Obviously, there were some emotions that were more intense that took a lot longer to deal with. So it took multiple dreams and multiple efforts. But my progress of getting through those, working through it all, would have been so much slower if I didn't have my dreams. And I can say with certainty now that my dreams are like bionic limbs to me now. I am notorious amongst my peers, including friends, loved ones, and even co-workers, of being known for being quite resilient, of being able to be optimistic and have this kind of strength around me when it comes to really difficult situations. And a lot of people don't understand that strength actually comes from my dreams. Being able to shut off when I'm sleeping, but at the same time, utilizing my subconscious as it's meant to survive optimally. Because we evolved from no longer having to fight so hard to survive, just to find somewhere to sleep, find things to eat, try not to get killed. We were able to consciously evolve to focus on other things and worry about other things. And your subconscious evolved in the background to also help you survive on a more subtle level. And now, like consciously, it's all about mental health. mental well-being. That's our form of survival now, because if our mental health collapses, we collapse. But your subconscious also evolved to support that. And it does so by finding ways to make life easier for you, finding ways to make you become the best person that you can become. And dreams are a great insight into yourself and figuring out how to be happier, how to become this person. Because your subconscious is so incredibly intelligent. It is, I compare it very often to a supercomputer or like a grandmaster in chess. It thinks multiple moves ahead. In the same way that your subconscious is balancing all these things going on in your body constantly, it has this ability to work in the background in a way we have to directly focus on things one at a time, really, don't we? We have to be like, yes, focus on this, focus on that. Subconscious doesn't. The subconscious has this reign to just go free and just work on multiple things in the background. I'm sure loads of you can relate to almost being able to remember something just there at the tip of your tongue. And then you forget about it. And then later on in the day, you're just doing your own thing, you focus on something else, and bam, pops into your head. Because your subconscious is like, oh yeah, here, by the way, bam, sorted it for you. I got it. I remembered. Here you go. So dream interpretation is such an important tool. It really, really is. And it's not utilized enough. And it's not hard to do. It's not hard to do. It used to be. It used to be when I started dream interpretation when I was 14, I had to open a book. I had to open a book that, again, was drawn on multiple studies and was collectively compiled into one physical book. Then the internet kind of grew and you were able to do it online, but you had to filter through so much. You had to avoid all these dodgy websites, all these websites about people who didn't really know what they were talking about, people who thought they knew what they were talking about. Then you had to find these archives based off of science just hidden somewhere. And I only really found one website that I used for years upon years. But now, and you know, some people will not take this great, but things like AI, you know, but things like social media. There is so many ways now to access dream interpretation, because things like AI will pull all these different references from online and it will cross-reference them. So when you look for dream interpretation, it's not going to just take from one site or one, it's going to take from multiple. So you really have no excuse. Now, I will dedicate a whole episode on its own to dream interpretation, because it's not just as easy to just look up, like, what does a flying teacup mean? Or flying teacup dream interpretation. Because in the same way that you communicate very differently from someone else, your subconscious is you. It is a part of you. And it also has its unique communication style, like you do. So it takes time to kind of get to know your own subconscious communication style. And it takes time to understand all these different meanings and how it's trying to communicate and what it's trying to say and how it's trying to say it or why it's saying it the way it is. And dream interpretation is also a lot like body language. If you see someone crossing their arms, they could be defensive, they could be cold, they could just find it more comfortable because there are two people sitting on either side and stuff on their lap. You have to look in clusters. You can't just look at one thing. You have to look at other signs in order to paint a full picture. And that's why certain dream interpretations can mean different things depending on context. It might be positive in one way, or it might be negative in another, but it's up to you to interpret the rest of the dream. Are the rest of the stuff positive? Or are they all negative based? In which case, then yeah, this one thing is probably negative. You know? Or do you have negative stuff going on in your life? Was there something negative that happened months ago, but you never dealt with it, but now you're okay? So your brain says, hey, now that you're okay and you're relaxed, why don't you deal with this because you have the time? Basically. And remember, even if you don't remember your dreams, science shows you are always dreaming. You are always dreaming, unless you have brain injury or neurological condition or under very heavy substance abuse, or you are dreaming all the time. And that's why even if you don't remember it, you can wake up feeling irritated, waking up the wrong side of the bed because maybe you had a bad dream, because maybe you're going through stuff, but you were like, oh no, I'm fine. And then your dream's like, no, you're not. Or maybe it's a case where, like I said, you're fine now, but then you didn't deal with something a few months ago or a week ago. And then your brain is like, okay, now it's time. So you wake up cranky because either you didn't finish the dream, or you need more dreams to kind of work through it, or you need to put in the conscious effort in your waking life to also move through it. That it's a joint effort. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you had a really, really rough night and then you sleep and then you're just better. You just wake up and you're like, wow, I feel much better now. Nice, So with that, I will leave it at that because I have talked for way too long now. But the only thing I have left to say is what I'm going to cover in the next episode. And then the next episode, I'm going to start going into how I developed and came about my own hypothesis, kind of what it roughly is. And I am telling you, you will not see this coming. I will bet money. Unless I've told you, I will bet so much money that you will never see this coming. So stay tuned for that. I will talk about how it massively changed my life, how it affected how I view dreams and my own subconscious and humanity as a whole, as a species. Oh my God. Don't even get me started, or do, because that's the point. I'm going to talk about how I developed into lucid dreaming and more, and tips and tricks that I think might help other people to get into it. And then important moments where dreams influenced my own life, where it changed things, where it really made an impact and a difference in my own life. And important dreams then that helped contribute and provide evidence towards this hypothesis I have. And then, to create evidence towards this hypothesis I have, and important dreams that impacted my life. Yeah. And then I might, if I have time, I might briefly mention, kind of tease out, gently what the other half of my theory or my hypothesis is. We'll see though, we'll see. So with that, I will love you and I will leave you until next time.